Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for us to welcome you here at the Austrian Parliament. It's not really our parliament, but for 3 years, hopefully not for more, this is the venue where we meet to have our plenary sessions. Both chambers use this venue, and I hope you enjoyed the dinner last night, the bright view over Vienna, the meal and everything else, so we can start with our work. This chairpersons meeting is the first meeting within the parliamentary dimension of our presidency. The Austrian Presidency of the Council of the European Union is now the third after 1998 and 2006. We will do again our best to meet expectations and achieve concrete results. And the last conference of the parliamentary dimension will be the Speakers' Conference. Next year in April it will take place, and I am therefore pleased to give the floor to the President of the National Council, Mr. Wolfgang SOBOTKA, a warm welcome, Wolfgang, and to the President of the Federal Council, Madame Inge POSCH-GRUSKA, who will take the floor after Wolfgang. Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, especially President of our Bundesrat. It's a great pleasure for us to host the Conference of COSAC in our alternative location of our House of Parliament. Now I want to switch in German because it's easier for me to express my ideas. Sie sind hier.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our alternative location. As I said, it's part of the Hofburg Palace, and it's a special building of symbolic importance for Austria. It stands for Austria. It has always been a building that brought people together. It wasn't the emperor's building. This was a location where people from all over Europe came together, and on the occasion of Austria's third presidency of the European Union, I'm particularly happy to welcome you here today as representatives of the Parliamentary Committees for European Union Affairs. On the 1st of July, Austria's third presidency began, and today this is the first parliamentary meeting. Parliamentary cooperation these days is more important than ever. We are facing major challenges, challenges to be addressed by the Austrian presidency, but challenges also that concern Europe as a whole. We've more or less overcome the financial crisis and the euro crisis, but the banking union is not yet fully functional, and the euro as a key currency has not yet gained the importance it deserves. Think of the Iran deal. We would have had much better conditions for negotiating with Iran and ultimately also with the United States if the euro were already a key currency. The security crisis, which in 2016 made headlines with the terrorist attacks of the editorial office of Charlie Hebdo and a kosher supermarket, and which has taken roots in the minds of Europeans. Now, this security crisis has changed us in recent years. Police work has been intensified, and cooperation among police and intelligence services has improved. Today, we are confronted with the problem of foreign terrorist fighters, the problem of returnees, and we find that thanks to intensified police and intelligence cooperation, numerous attacks were prevented. We are aware of the fact that radical Islam is a danger, not just for Europe, but for large parts of the world. And most recently, we've seen that cybercrime is a particular challenge, a challenge which we're not able to cope with and to fight against. Nevertheless, international drug trafficking rings, human trafficking bands, and money launderers still find places where to do their evil business. The migration crisis, which I would think is the crisis most frequently discussed these days, and which resulted in questions regarding the states under the rule of law. This is a crisis which we can feel at all levels, from the local level to the national to the European level. We know that migration is an issue for the 21st century. We know that particularly when it comes to the Schengen regime and the protection of external borders, we did not enforce legal acts for a long time, and we know that it will be necessary to take subsequent steps, because after migration comes integration. But at the same time, we do have to return people to their countries of origin. There is no alternative to that. The major efforts made in recent years have been successful to a considerable extent, but at the same time, society is being challenged to an increasing extent in these issues. Conflicts become more pronounced, and many offer solutions, but don't translate these solutions into deeds, and it will take some time in the field of external border protection to become really effective. We need a strengthened Frontex, and we need a stronger position also as far as the neighboring countries of the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe are concerned, so that we can deal with this issue on an equal level with our partners in the Middle East and in Northern Africa. Brexit, considering the most recent events in the United Kingdom, the resignation of the minister in charge, an important communique published by Great Britain, and the European response, all that has given the Brexit issue a new dimension. And we are fully aware of the fact that under the Austrian Presidency, negotiations should be completed or concluded by October, and we're confident that we will be able to take the necessary steps. So there are major issues on our agenda, also regarding the free movement of persons and the free movement of goods in the European Union. Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator of the European Union, on the basis of his experience and thanks to his negotiating skills, he has been able to bring about convergence among the 27 member states of the European Union. And I think it's important for parliaments to move along the same lines. And Austria is confident that this joint position of the European Union vis-à-vis the United Kingdom will be maintained. Now, there is also the multi-annual financial framework. Agricultural funds, funds for cohesion are major drivers of European policy for us. Nevertheless, we face the challenge that other policies also need funds, and we have to ask ourselves, where can we enhance the efficiency of the machinery in Brussels in order to ease the tension between net payers and other member states, also at parliamentary level. I was in the United States last week, and there are also challenges confronting us in respect of transatlantic relations. A customs policy introduced by the United States practically overnight means major economic and also diplomatic challenges for us, and it will be up to us, it will be up to Europe to come up with a clear and strong answer, because what the United States wants, first and foremost, is to come up with a new starting position for trade negotiations. Nevertheless, transatlantic relations are extremely important for the European Union, and this also concerns our relations with the Middle East, with Ukraine and Russia. I think dialogue with Russia has to be aimed at long-term peace and long-term stability. And this will only be possible if Russia is a partner at the table, be it about Nord Stream, be it about the Crimea or the Donbas region. These are issues of absolutely crucial importance, and it takes a very special approach if we want to advance the peace process in Ukraine and at the same time comply with the Minsk agreement. For the Austrian presidency and for the Austrian Parliament, Southeastern Europe, that is the Western Balkans, are of particular importance. These countries must be given a European perspective. We must be able to do that. The Austrian Parliament is doing that in two ways. On the one hand, we are offering scholarships to these countries so that they can engage in contacts with Austrian parliamentarians. And we have another model project. It's what we call the Democracy Workshop, which has already been implemented in Kosovo and Montenegro. This is meant as an example how parliaments can engage in outreach activities to familiarize the population with the work of parliamentarians and with the legislative measures taken there. Parliamentarism is an essential basis of the rule of law and of legal certainty. And if we want investors to have confidence in these countries, what we need is stability and legal certainty. Therefore, one of the priorities, not just of the Austrian presidency, but beyond that, will be to engage in dialogue in a spirit of partnership with these countries, accompanying them on the road to Europe. We know that these countries are being supported by others as well in economic terms. I'm referring to Russia and Turkey, and in particular China. China has a great interest of having a gateway into Europe there, into the European Union. And here, too, we need to find a European response. It's nothing new for you because you're working on a day-to-day basis in this political process. You're aware of these challenges, but I'm not one of those who think that Europe is going to fall apart or that Europe is at a turning point. Europe has coped with other crises in the past, but the achievements that have benefited the European population, the achievements that have given us prosperity and security, should not be put at risk. But at the same time, we have to be aware of the worries, concerns, and anxieties of those at the European hotspots. This is not something we should ignore. The Austrian presidency will be working towards convergence, but at the same time respect and accept different positions while having the entire effort in mind. In national parliaments, positions are often expressed in very strong terms, but parliamentary cooperation can be many-faceted and therefore contribute essentially to cooperation and mutual understanding in Europe. I do hope that in working together, in engaging in dialogue, this conference will strengthen the way we deal with each other respectively and at the same time strengthen the position of Europe and the European Union it deserves all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a productive and successful meeting and hope that you will return to your national parliaments stronger and better informed.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident.
Mr. President, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I too would like to welcome you most cordially in the Austrian Parliament. In my capacity as President of the Federal Council, I'm particularly happy that this body that brings together the Parliamentary Committees for Union Affairs of the Parliamentary Chambers will discuss the priorities of the Austrian presidency and the future of the European Union. The Austrian Federal Council, as the chamber representing the Länder, the provinces of Austria, is the interface between the European Union and the citizens of our country. The Federal Council is the European chamber and the chamber of the future. The Austrian federal government decided to make the principle of subsidiarity as one of several issues a priority of its presidency. The second chamber, in particular, the European Affairs Committee of the Federal Council, is strongly committed to European affairs and exercises its right of participation. As regards subsidiarity checks, the Federal Council is one of the most active chambers of the European Union. Subsidiarity is an important principle of the EU, but it must not be abused to enhance nationalistic thinking. I would warn against that. Important challenges have to be addressed and resolved together. The President of the National Council just said that citizen confidence in the European Union suffered in recent years because of a variety of crises. Criticism of the European Union has become more pronounced, including in Austria. However, we are agreed that we want to regain citizen confidence. Citizen involvement and citizen participation is to be placed in the foreground in the future development of the European Union. And it's great to see that national parliaments, through interparliamentary conferences like the one today, are going to move the dialogue forward. And with this in mind, I wish you all an interesting and successful conference with important results for the European Union as a whole. Once again, a cordial welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, now we continue with our procedure. But before we start with this, let me welcome those chairpersons who were recently elected into their current positions and are attending the COSAC Chairpersons meeting for the first time. Therefore, I welcome Mr. Sergio Patelli, Chair of the EU Policies Committee of the Italian Chamber of Deputies, Mr. Ettore Antonio Licheri, Chair of the Committee on EU Affairs of the Italian Senate, Ms. Salima Belay, Deputy Chair of the Committee of European Affairs of the Dutch Tweede Kamer, and Ato Satonen, Chair of the Grant Committee of the Finnish Eduskunta. Warm welcome here. Now I would like to briefly inform you on some practical issues. Interpretation services are available in English, French, German, Italian, and Polish. Please follow the instructions on your table. You have this leaflet on your table. There you will see also how to access to Wi-Fi. For information, this conference is being streamed live on the web page of our Parliamentary Dimension. You can also follow our meeting on Twitter and Facebook. When requesting the floor, please use the colored cards that were placed in your folders. After filling in your name and chamber, please hand the cards to the designated desk you see in the corner of this meeting room. Requests will be taken until the end of the speech of the last keynote speaker in each session. Once we open the floor for debate, we will no longer accept requests. The floor will be, in principle, be given to the delegates in order in which their requests are submitted. The list of order and the time available for each speaker will be displayed on the screen above. All the relevant documents have been distributed before the conference. In case of need, documents may be printed by our conference secretariat outside the meeting hall. We try to lower paper consumption as much as possible. Water, coffee, and refreshments are available outside the plenary room during the whole conference. And finally, if you have any further questions, our staff is more than happy to assist you. So, dear colleagues, let us now proceed to the adoption of the agenda of this COSAC meeting. A draft program of our meeting has already been distributed to you. Let me briefly recap the agenda. On the agenda, we have two topics. First, the priorities of the Austrian Presidency of the Council of the European Union. And second, the second session is dedicated to the future and perspectives of the European Union. Let me now open the floor for short comments, if there are any. Yes, there is one from Romania.
So, thank you very much, Chair. A kind request for the organizers. We made almost every meeting before. I'm sorry for forgetting to stress it during yesterday's Troika meeting. Please register for the next COSAC the political party each participant belongs to. We've been already worried during the time listening to colleagues from traditional pro-European and very democratic parties speaking as far-right representatives, or listening to my colleagues, Social Democrats, supporting neoliberal views. So at least not to be confused, to know who is who. Thank you very much.
What you proposed, we will
do. Register yeah. The political
yes.
party for
yes.
each of us.
Yes, we will do it.
Yeah.
Some minutes later, I will tell it again. Okay, then the next is from the Netherlands, Salima Belay.
Honourable Chair, dear honourable members of the delegation, I'd like to congratulate the Australian Presidency for the organisation of these COSAC chairs. The Dutch delegation looks forward to fruitful discussions about the important topics which are put on the agenda in these COSAC chairs. We are glad to see that transparency is made part of the questionnaire for the biannual report, and our Commission wishes to express its support for this important matter. Moreover, the Dutch delegation is delighted with the draft programme of the plenary COSAC in November, where transparency is put on the agenda in relation to the upcoming European elections in May 2019. With regard to the plenary COSAC in November, the Dutch delegation has one remark. After this COSAC conference, the Dutch House of Representatives, together with the Dutch Senate and the Danish Parliament, is going to send a letter to President Tusk, Chancellor Kurz and President of the Council of the European Union, and to President Centeno of the Eurogroup, to give a more detailed answer on the 4 proposals which are presented at the plenary COSAC last year in Tallinn. In this letter, we make a reference to the adopted contributions at last plenary COSAC in Sofia. We expect the answers from the institutions to be sent in before the plenary COSAC. Maybe we can discuss these answers during the plenary COSAC in these sessions about transparency. I would like to conclude with expressing our gratitude for the wider support we have encountered amongst the delegation regarding this important topic of transparency. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks a lot, the Netherlands, for your work, and as you mentioned it, we will have it on the agenda in our plenary session. Now, the next is Richard Herzig from Hungary.
Thank you, the floor, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank Austria for its support of the Hungarian presidency of the Visegrad Group. We appreciated really that Mr. Wolfgang SOBOTKA attended the informal meeting of the Speakers of Parliament of Visegrad 4 countries in June. In addition, we would like to thank him for the valuable contribution to the discussions on the Euro-Atlantic integration of Western Balkan countries, the migration and the MFF. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, we have started now a discussion and we have not our agenda already approved, but I have one more from France, Jean Bisset.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to talk about the format of our discussions, and then I'd like to talk about the choice of topics. As far as the format is concerned, well, this was already discussed during the Sofia meeting. Now, the time allotted to the parliamentarians is quite short. What would be the right solution? Well, to have fewer requests for the floor during our meetings. And then the second comment. This alludes to the choice of topics. Now, President Bergman, well, I sent a letter to the colleague. The conclusions drawn after some trade agreements, whether it's joint agreements or simple agreements, well, This has necessitated discussions at national level that are not always understood by our public. So we should talk about these during our COSAC meetings, so that we are in a position at parliamentary level to exchange our experiences. This was already discussed on several occasions during the State of the Union address of President Juncker, and this would make it possible for us to trigger a dialogue with representatives of European institutions. Thank you.
We will discuss this issue later when we discuss the letters we have received. Now there are no more comments, and if there are no comments anymore, then the agenda for this COSAC Chairpersons meeting can be considered as approved. Yes. Thank you. So it is approved. Let us now move to the next agenda item, which is procedural matters. Dear colleagues, I would like to inform you on the results of the meeting of the Presidential Troika of COSAC we had yesterday, of letters received by the Presidency, and other procedural issues. First, the draft agenda of the 16th COSAC plenary meeting. The plenary meeting of the COSAC will take place at the permanent conference facility of the Council Presidency of Austria at the Conference Center Vienna, just across Danube River, on the 18th to the 20th of November. We have included 4 topics on the agenda of this plenary meeting. First, the state of play of the Austrian Presidency of the Council of the European Union. Second, a transparent European Union closer to its citizens in light of the upcoming elections to the European Parliament. Third, climate policy and energy union. And finally, Brexit. I believe that we have chosen some of the key issues and challenges we are facing today, and that we can expect some interesting debates. We have invited 2 members of the Austrian government, Minister for European Affairs, Arts, Culture and Media, Mr. Blümel, and the Minister for Constitutional Affairs, Reforms, Deregulation and Justice, Mr. Moser, and the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Šefčovič, for Climate Policy and Energy Union, and the EU Chief Negotiator for Brexit, Mr. Michel Barnier. In this regard, we have asked also the British delegation to propose a keynote speaker of the UK Parliament for this agenda item. Next, I would like to briefly outline the 30th biannual report of COSAC, which will be based on the information obtained from the questionnaire. The report will be divided into 3 chapters. Chapter 1 will deal with the role of national parliaments in ensuring transparency and bringing the EU closer to its citizens. It will take into account the views of parliaments on best practices of parliaments in their openness towards their citizens. The second section of this chapter will concentrate on the Parliament's view on the work and the outcome of the task force on subsidiarity, proportionality, and doing less more efficiently. Chapter 2 seeks to get the views of parliaments on climate policy and energy discussions in their plenaries and committees. The second section will focus on the 2020 climate and energy package of the European Union, including its implementation as well as the way towards 2030 and 2050 energy strategies. Finally, Chapter 3 will focus on the state of play of Brexit and its implications for the future of the EU. Parliaments will be asked about their respective handling of the discussion about a member state leaving the European Union. The questionnaire will be sent to the delegations on 27th of July, and replies will be expected by 18th of September. Third, letters received by the Presidency. We have received letters from the Parliament of Norway, Iceland and Switzerland, as well as from the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, having its seat here in Vienna regarding participation at COSAC meetings. I'm glad to welcome them all here, with the exception of Iceland. The chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Icelandic Parliament is not able to attend the Chairpersons meeting in July, but the delegation looks forward to attending the meeting in November. We have also received a letter from Mr. Angel Tilva, chair of the Committee of the European Affairs of the Chamber of Deputies of the Parliament of Romania, regretting that the Chamber of Deputies is not in the position to be represented at our meeting today because they have plenary session in Bucharest. However, I'm glad that the Romanian Senate takes part, and therefore I welcome Ms. Crețu, Chair of the European Affairs Committee and new member of the Troika. Next, we have received a letter from Mr. Jean Pisset. He took also the floor already, Chair of the European Affairs Committee of the French Senate, with a request to include an additional item into the agenda of the COSAC plenary meeting regarding the participation of national parliaments in the process of negotiating trade agreements between the EU and third countries. After having discussed the letters during yesterday's meeting of the Troika, let me inform you that we do not plan to include a new separate item on the agenda, as I believe time constraints would prevent us from dedicating a whole session on the engagement of national parliaments in the trade negotiations. But I encourage Mr. Pisset, as I did it also in a bilateral discussion we had yesterday, to raise this issue during the debate of the second session, Transparent European Union Closer to its Citizens, in light of the upcoming elections of the European Parliament. The role of the national parliaments in the process of negotiating trade agreements between the EU and third countries is one aspect of scrutinizing governments and EU institutions in general, as I see it. Yeah, and transparency of negotiations was one of the key issues also during the negotiations for TTIP and CETA, as also this aspect is covered by session 2. Finally, let me draw your attention to a letter signed by Mr. Kriechbaum, Chair of the European Affairs Committee of the German Bundestag, and Ms. Delay, Chair of the European Affairs Committee of the French Assemblée Nationale. After discussions in the Troika, I can confirm that the Austrian Chair of COSAC will consider your suggestion to allow enough time for discussions by limiting the number of keynote speakers. Here we will be very strict. When registering for the plenary meeting in November, delegations will be asked to provide us with their party affiliation, as our colleague from Romania wanted to have it, in order to display it in the list of participants. And of course, we try to put items on the agenda which are of topical interest. I have to stress, however, that we have to coordinate items also with other formats of parliamentary dimensions, so that we do not duplicate them. Dear colleagues, so now I am opening the discussion on these procedural issues. Some of them we discussed already. If there is no comment anymore, then, colleagues, I have to say thank you.